Houston, we have a
Jonah?
problem. We have a problem, Houston. Our problem is that, hear me out.
Okay.
Feudalism is bad.
Really?
That's my viewpoint.
Okay.
I'm going to defend that in this here episode here. I think that feudalism is bad. That is position number 1.
Okay.
Position number 2. Landlords are feudal dictators.
Landlords are feudal dictators.
Landlords are feudal dictators. This is my
Okay.
position. All right. Allow me to defend my position. Okay. We begin with an island. Let us propose an island.
What kind of island? Is it like
we're going to go with tropical. It has lots of coconuts. Okay? Lots of coconuts. They're delicious coconuts. Okay? It also has some dodo birds. They're not extinct. They only live on this island. Okay? They're not quite the same as the dodo birds that everyone thinks about. It's kind of like the Galapagos, you know? This is from like once upon a time back, if you go down enough generations, it was the same as a dodo bird that we think of. But this is a different kind of dodo bird that's slightly different, but they also can't fly and they're also very meaty and delicious. Okay? The point is, there's dodo birds, they're delicious. There's land, it is like perfectly capable of farming. There's lots of coconuts. Okay. There's a ship. There's a shipwreck, and the two of us are the only survivors. Okay. But I get there first. I swim over to the land first, and I stand on the land. I'm the first human to ever be on this land. I stand on this land, and I say, I claim this land for me. It's only my land.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get to the land, and I say, Houston, you have to pay me rent. If you want to live on this land, it's my island. So you have to pay me rent to live on my island.
Okay.
Is that morally permissible?
I guess what do we mean by morally permissible?
Is it fair for me to say that even though I only got there like 2 minutes before you, that just because I got to the island first, that now you have to pay me rent to live on the land? And let's say that this rent that I'm talking about is that you have to give me half of the coconuts that you collect.
Okay.
A full half of the coconuts that you collect go to me. Just because I got there first, because it's my land.
Yeah. That doesn't seem very fair.
Why not?
Because I don't know. You just got there first.
Because I got there first. There's no moral argument that just because like, bruh, I got there first. It's not an argument. Okay. What if I get there a year before you?
Oh, I feel like that's still jank. Like, why can't we just share the land?
Why can't we just share the land? I agree with you. Why can't we just share the land? Okay. What if, hear me out.
Okay.
There's 4 of me.
4 of you?
There's 4 different people who have been on this island. And then you come along and you're like, I am now forced to live on this island because I have no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
Now is it fair for me to make you pay to live on this island?
Are the other 4 people paying to live on this island? Or no, they're
the other 4 people we're all owners of like our own plot of land. So there's 4 different plots of this island. There's 4 different like sections, these quadrants, and you have to rent a part of one of these quadrants in order to survive. And otherwise, we're just going to throw you back to the sea and you're going to die.
Yeah, that doesn't seem very fair.
What if there's 400 of us though? What if there's 4,000 of us?
Okay.
When does it become moral to own land?
Yeah, doesn't seem very good.
It doesn't seem very good at all.
No.
Here's my position.
Okay.
I propose a different solution. My solution is that there's 2 of us, or there's 4 of us, or there's 4,000 of us, there's 400 of us, whatever it is.
Okay.
What we do is we say, hey, buddy, we should share the land. That's the easiest one that we can say. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, particularly when there's a lot of us. So here's my proposal. Let's say there's one side that's really nice for. I'm assuming that we don't like each other very much. We don't want to live together. You smell. You like snore. Whatever it is, we don't want to live in the same house. But there's one spot on this island that's really good for a teepee or for a shack or whatever we're going to make on our deserted island. It's a really good hammock spot. I want the hammock spot. Okay. I propose that I should be able to rent the hammock spot from you, right? I should be paying you for the right to have exclusive access to this because you're the only other person in society. That seems pretty reasonable, right? Now, obviously, if you want exclusive access to one component, then you should also have to pay me for exclusive access to that component. And so if we're going to, so either we would break it down to a complete like 50-50 cut of the whole island, or we could just say like this particular spot is just me, or this particular spot is just Houston, and for the rest of it, it's mostly just like collective space, right?
Okay.
Both of those seems perfectly reasonable.
Sure.
Now let's add 10 more people. Now we have 12 people living on this island. I propose that we should keep doing it in that same way. What we should do is we should say this land belongs to all of us collectively. None of us like deserve this land more than the other person. And therefore, we should all be distributing its value. So let's say I'm really good at farming coconut trees, right? I'm a really hardworking farmer for farming the coconut trees. I will spend a lot of my time farming, and therefore it makes sense from an economic perspective for everyone to say, okay, Jonah, you can have all of the coconut space, like all of the coconut farming like area. I don't know how farms work. I don't know how coconuts work. Land, I assume they're on land. I assume they're not in the water. I literally don't even know if they're in the marsh or if they're in whatever. The point is, I'm good at coconut farming. And so I am going to have the coconut farm space, and I'll have the exclusive control, the monopolistic control over that land. But I'll pay people in free access to coconuts in order to do that. And the way that will work is that like I will offer, hey, like I'll give everyone 10 coconuts a year if I get to have exclusive control of this. And then obviously people are going to want more than 10 coconuts. So then they'll also probably buy more coconuts from me. And that part's to my labor. But if you come along and you're like, nah, I'll give everyone 11 coconuts each if I get to have exclusive access to this. Now there's a bidding war. Now we're all fighting over who gets to have this really nice plot of land. And whoever's willing to give the most money to the rest of the people, that's the person who gets it. It's awesome. I'm saying money, I mean coconuts, but they're the same thing. Economic value is being exchanged, right? Here's my hot take. Money is just economic value. These whole like, let's get rid of money people. Those people are silly. Money is just a stand-in for economic value. The point is there's economic value, and I'm giving economic value to other people in order to have exclusive rights. Another person is giving economic value to have exclusive rights over a particular really nice spot for lobster fishing or whatever the hell it is, right? So that's how we're building out the society. And the result of this is that every single one of us is getting some minimum across, even if you're just like sitting on your ass doing absolutely nothing, you will get a certain amount of lobster. You will get a certain amount of coconuts. You will get a certain amount just for simply being a person who operates on this island. But if you want to move forward beyond that, you're probably going to have to end up working in order to create something better.
So what happens? Let's go back a bit to the bidding war, because what happens if the person who wins, they get the right to do the coconuts or whatever? What happens to the other person?
So first off, they just get 10 coconuts. So that's Gucci. They're very happy they just got 10 coconuts, right? And presumably, the reason that they're willing to take that is because they aren't willing to do the work to provide people 11 coconuts, right?
Yeah.
So they're doing it because it's in their economic interest to let that happen. Every single person would have also had the chance to take out to bid on the same farm, to bid on the same spot and put in their own work and put in their own energy to do it. So every single person on the island is better off because I'm a really hard worker and really good at farming coconuts. Let's clarify, not in real life, only in this example, because I'm really bad at coconuts. I don't know anything about farming. Yes.
So then what about the people, like the person who was doing it before? Like they lose their livelihood, they lose
no. Presumably because presumably the reason they're willing to give up that thing, they're still in the bidding. It's not like they're forced out all of a sudden, like you've been doing it for the last 2 years. You're forced out, you can no longer bid there. Presumably the reason they're willing to say, okay, take that spot, is because they like the 11 coconuts just as much as everyone else, or the 10 coconuts as much as anyone else. And there's other places on the island as well that they can also do work, right? They can also become a fisher, or they can also become a coconut farmer, just in a different plot, a slightly less nice plot. So they're still farming, but they're farming at a plot that's not as nice. So they only have to give everyone 3 coconuts a year for the right to have exclusive access to this plot. And they're still getting their 11 coconuts, and they're also making a surplus profit off of their plot, because the cost of that plot that they have to pay for everyone else is a much lower plot level.
So you're switching from a system that favors the person who gets there first to the person who can do it the best.
The person who works hardest. Yeah.
Not necessarily work hardest, but who can do it the best. Because I feel like even if the person who's doing the 10, maybe they just don't have the means or the talent to do 11. But the person who has 11 can do it. It's not necessarily not working hard, they just can't do it.
I guess that's right. Sure. But the result is that the person who used to be doing the 10 is still getting 10. It's not like they're screwed over in this way, because by definition,
that's also how they're making money on the side to like feed whatever else, to do whatever else they want to do.
Yep.
And so you're also kind of like upheaving their like livelihood because someone else does it better than you. Doesn't feel great.
So, okay, there's sort of 2 answers. The first answer is, what's the alternative? And the alternative that we have right now is clearly worse, I would argue. But the second answer is, I don't think that you're totally destroying their livelihood, because it's not like there's no other land. If there was no other land, you'd break into smaller plots, right? Like if you truly didn't have any other option, you would say no to the 11. Right? If you had no other option, that would not be something you'd be willing to accept. That even if they were willing to offer you 11 coconuts, you'd say, no, I want to break it into smaller plots. You'd say, I want to have one smaller plot that I can provide coconuts. You can do one, so we'll break it down to, I do this 5, this smaller plot, you do this 6, and this bigger plot.
Interesting. Okay.
Right? Because every single person in this economy, if you're assuming that they all want to work and be provided, and let's clarify, maybe I'm a fat ass and just want to sit there on the beach and not do any work, right? Sure. Maybe I'm perfectly happy, so long as I have my one hammock spot, to just sit there eating the coconuts of everyone else's labor and not really working that hard, right? And so long as I'm not using other people's resources, so long as I'm not sort of like taking stuff from other people, I think it's pretty much okay, actually.
Oh.
Right? So this is like, so it allows a building out of the system. Okay. Now,
large scale, what does that mean?
At a large scale, exactly. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, at a large scale, there's sort of 2 questions. There's one question, what do we do tomorrow? There's another question of what do we do in 100 years to make this all perfect? So we're going to start with the 100 years, because I like utopia. Utopia is more fun. And I don't like this whole like, oh, let's try to fix things like piece by piece, even though obviously that's how the change works. It's just not as fun. So we're going to start with the fun stuff. The fun stuff is we can do this at a national level. The way it would work is all of the value of the land, all of the value of the property and the entire country, right, would be owned by, I like to say the people, but the stand-in for the people is the people's cooperative, which is to say the government. That's going to be another whole episode. I think that the government is a co-op, but that's a whole different story. The point is, the government would be the one who owns it, but the government would be the one who runs it. Instead, they would rent out monopolistic control over a given plot of land to individuals each year.
Okay.
So like every year, like obviously I'm in a house right now. This house would be rented out, and whoever is willing to pay the most money would be the one who gets the house for that year. And that money would go to the government. And so that government would then use it either as a stand-in for taxes. Hot take: taxes are terrible. That's another whole conversation. But also, I should clarify: taxes aren't just terrible. Taxes are slavery. But that's whatever. That's a different discussion. The point is that we're going to like that money is collective money. It belongs to everyone. There's no reason that rent should go to one person, right?
Yeah.
In the same way, if you go all the way back to like the one dude who got to the island first, go fuck yourself. I don't care that you got there first. It's not your land. You didn't create the land. You just got there first. You don't get points for getting there first. You don't get points for getting here in America first. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. You don't deserve that. Go away. You're a liar. You don't have to go away. You can stay here, but you're a liar. You also can't own the land. The point is that you have to build it in this way. So you allow them. It's rented out to individuals. The money goes to the collective. The problem here is that, okay, if we talk about rent in the historic way that rent tends to work, people run down rented apartments, right? Because like as a renter, it's not in your interest to build it up and make it nicer, right?
No.
Like why the hell would you? So I propose a secondary component. I think that you should have rent, just like normal, like give money to the government, form of rental properties. But also we should have this thing called infrastructural rent. And what infrastructural rent is you just build shit. You build shit that makes the value of the property go up. And as you're increasing the value of the property, you're increasing the rental value for the next renter. The person who rents after you is going to rent at a higher price than you did because you're making the infrastructure better. So if you're building a house on an empty plot, that's good. If you're fixing stuff up, that's good. If you're doing whatever it is, you're infrastructurally improving the plot by doing that. That should count as rent.
Okay. I do want to talk though about how when you gave the example about you living in your house, right? Whoever pays the most amount of money gets to live in the house.
Mm-hmm.
How do you decide what the most is? Like, how do you decide what the house's value is?
Yeah, there's a bid.
A bid. So
there's a bid.
Whoever is willing to pay the most for the house.
Right.
How does that work for like small apartments and like?
There's a bid. Whoever's
bid?
willing. Yeah, there's a bid.
What if you just can't pay? What if you can't pay the money?
Well, so that's the point. So okay. First off, let's clarify. You can pay the money because there would be two reasons. Number one, I would propose an infrastructural rent assumption of $1,000 a year. So the assumption is that on average, and there have been studies on this. I don't have them in front of me because I'm an idiot. But the point is that the average person in the United States increases the value, the infrastructural value of their home by about $1,000 a year on average, right? And obviously that's a little bit higher for nicer apartment buildings and a little bit lower for not so nice ones, of course. But on average, and I think that we should just do this in terms of the law of average, because we're talking not in terms of the value of the house, but rather the value of the labor of the person. Simply by operating in a place and not letting it fall into decay because no one's living there, you are providing $1,000 ish a year. And so what I would propose is a minimum sort of, you can call it a housing subsidy, I guess, but I would call it an infrastructural rent sort of minimum, presumptive minimum of $1,000 a year. And so every single person in America would have basically $1,000 stipend to get housing. And that's per person. If you're a family of five, that ends up being $5,000 a year, which is not, wildly, crazy, but you can live on that in terms of housing in a low income context, and particularly if you start to build that out in terms and add in jobs and add in sort of the larger workings of the economy, you can start to build out based on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how do you stop people from buying up a bunch of different apartments and then selling them out again?
This is the fun part. I don't want to.
Okay.
Because they're renting it out for a year, right?
Sure.
Okay. So there's two ways that they do that. There's some people you want to rent from. So if you're a college student, You can imagine college students are pretty terrible as a general rule as renters.
Sure.
We tend to break shit. We tend to drill into walls. We tend to have wild ragers with all of the crack cocaine and all of the marijuana, all of the crazy stuff, right? We tend to punch walls because we have too much built up pent up testosterone, the pew pew kapow, right? So all of that makes us bad renters. As a normal sense for all of society in this, you would obviously have to take out you'd have to pay if you are responsible for a bunch of degradation of housing, right? And you'd have to pay basically for what amounts to insurance of the house if you're like have a history of like fucking shit up. So college students don't want to have to deal with that, and they also don't want to have to move into a building that's really run down and gross. So if you want to, at the end of the season, at the end of this school year, one person would rent out the next year, right? And then they rent out the next year for like 16 different buildings, right? And then what they do is they spend the whole summer cleaning up and renovating and making all that stuff nice, infrastructurally improving it. And then they'd rent it out for the rest of the year at a higher value than what they rented it from the government, right?
Yeah.
So they're subleasing to individuals. Awesome. My response to that is fantastic, because what they're doing there is not actually acting as an owner or as a landlord. What they're really acting as is as a cleaning service. They're acting as builders. The value that they're getting there is the value of their own labor. They're not getting the value of the house itself. The value of the house itself already went to the government.
Right. But then you have the same issue of like landlords like paying absorbent, like charging people absorbent amounts of money to like just to exist in a place.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, because if you wanted to, presumably you could outbid them, right? As a college student, and you could choose consciously to live in a rundown home for the year. Or if you wanted to, if you had the extra funds, you could choose to pay a little bit extra and ensure that yours is a really nice, cleaned up space. And so realistically, the people who would end up cleaning it up are probably a bunch of college kids. That seems like a pretty reasonable, part-time or even full-time gig for a summer. You just rent out a bunch of housing, and it's not like you'll make your money back, and then you just rent those back out to your fellow kids, and your fellow kids are going to give you a little bit of extra money, and you end up making whatever it is, $1,000, $2,000 for the summer. Awesome, right? You're not getting crazy rich, but it's a reasonable summer gig.
Okay.
And so the second question is, what happens if someone just rents up a bunch of property and then doesn't use it?
Yeah.
My response is Gucci. That's awesome, because by definition, they're paying above market rate.
Right.
So I want them to do that. And if they want to waste their money and give extra money to the government, my response as a member of the government co-op is, you're throwing me money for no reason. And I like it when people throw money at me. I enjoy that. That is a pleasant experience.
Yeah. But then it's also like space that other people can't use. Right?
Yes, that's true. But the reason that they're the ones who are willing to pay the most is because no one else wants it that badly in terms of monetary incentive. And therefore, every single person else in society is better off because they're the one renting it.
But then what if I feel like it's not necessarily you don't want it based off of the bid, but what if you just can't pay for it? What if someone what if someone bids like $1 million for like, or like $3 million for like your house?
Okay, so let's play this out. So if someone bid $3 million to live in my house for a year,
sure,
the result of that would be that I now have the pool of money that the government now has is much bigger, right? Is $3 million bigger. Presumably the real value of my house is obviously much less than that, right? Whatever it is, 4,000. I don't want to make up numbers, but the point is that like the value
Yeah.
is much 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 higher
Yeah.
that they're giving to government than they actually should from an economic perspective. And so the result of that is that the government has much more money. The government is now going to use that money on doing other things. But meanwhile, it's not like I have any less money than I used to have. So I rent out the neighbor's house,
Mm-hmm.
and the neighbor's house over there is basically the same house, right? It's not drastically better or worse than my house. And so the result of that is that I still have the exact same amount of money that I used to have. I still have the same amount of money specifically for housing that I used to have, but all of a sudden the government has more. And so I am able to go about going to that different house. And also the government is much better off. And because the government is much better off, ultimately I am much better off. So it's not like I am actually screwed over by that. The only way I could be screwed over is if someone was willing to pay $3 million for this house and also for that house and also for that house and also for that house and blah, 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 in every direction, the totality of all of the infrastructure of the entire country. That's the only way I could get screwed. But the result of that would be 3 million times 270 million or however many houses it is.
Yeah.
Like
For all the houses.
for all of that going to the government, now we have plenty of money for the government to build more housing and plenty of money for the government to provide me whatever my needs might be. So I'm a happy camper if everyone pays $3 million a year for all the housing.
True. Okay, what's next?
Okay. Then you get to two questions. The first question is, what do we do tomorrow? And the second question is, how do we get to what I just proposed?
Yeah.
The thing that we do tomorrow, right now we have a property tax, right? Property taxes are horse manure. I hate them. We must cancel them. They're disgusting. The reason they're disgusting is because property taxes make you pay for the value of the house, of the work, right? Because like someone worked to create this house. No one worked to create the land underneath the house, but someone worked to create the house. Why the hell would I, like, imagine two plots. You have your two plots right next to each other. This plot is Houston's plot. Houston is a hard worker. This one is Fred's plot. Fred is a piece of garbage, and we hate Fred. Okay. They're both empty plots. Houston decides that he is going to work really hard. So Houston gets a job in the community, whatever you are. Let's make you a school teacher. Houston is a school teacher, and he is working really hard. His wife is working at the local bank. She's also working really hard. That's two full-time incomes, both of them, increasing the value of the society. Everyone else is better off because you're doing that. All of that is great. Also, you have kids that are going to the local high school. Also, you are, blah, 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 blah. You're very, very involved in the community. And also the infrastructure, the house that you built on this property directly results in an increased value of all of the property around you. Right? Mm-hmm. As you build up property values of one house, you're increasing the value of everyone of the entire neighborhood. Right? Meanwhile, this fucking asshole named Fred does nothing.
Yeah.
He sits on an empty plot.
Yeah.
Nothing is happening there. It's just all that happens is it's an empty plot. Because it's an empty plot, some, druggies, okay, some random college kids go in there and they like litter on it and they throw their glass. I don't know why. How are there always so many broken glass bottles? It's insane to me. Like, I don't understand it. Why is there still glass? There's so much glass all of the time in all of these places, all of these like empty plots. The point is it's overgrown. It's mangy. I don't know what mangy means, but it's mangy. And it's not a nice plot.
Yeah.
Right now, under the property tax system, you're paying more than Fred.
Yeah.
What the fuck? Why? We like you.
Yeah.
You're doing something.
Mm-hmm.
You're providing value to the economy. People like you. You're a teacher. Like you're on your wife is on the fucking PTA or some shit. You're also on the PTA because you're a teacher. I didn't think that part through. The point is that
so then why is that though? So that is it because you make more money? Is it because you
it's because you have a value of your house.
yeah.
The property tax, like, literally is punishing you for investing in the community and creating housing and creating the infrastructure that is necessary for the community to move forward. And that's
Gotcha.
bullshit. Instead, what we need is a land value tax. A land value tax would just say, listen, buddy, the value of the land underneath your building on this plot is basically the same as Fred's plot.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe yours is a little uphill and you have a better view. But the point is that, like, you know, approximately the value of the land there is the same. And so your taxes should be approximately the same. Obviously not literally the same, but approximately the same as his. Right? And in that sense, your taxes, let's imagine that right now you have a house that's worth $200,000 on a plot of land that's worth $100,000. And Fred has a plot that's worth $100,000, right? Both of your plots are worth the same amount. It's just that you have a $200,000 house on it. So woohoo, you're better, right? Okay. Right now, because we tax the value of the house and the value of the land as the same, you would have to pay literally 3 times as much money as he does. Fucking wild. Wild. If it's a 1% tax, right? 1% of the value is going to the government. 1% tax, that means that right now you have to pay $3,000 a year and he has to pay $1,000 a year. Fucking wild. Insane. Nonsense. How dare you? Bullshit.
Yes.
I don't like it.
What do we do?
What we do is we say it's just based on the land. So we're going to do a 2% tax on the land. And that means still we're going to get $4,000 between both of you. But instead it's going to be, he's $100,000, so he has to pay $2,000. The value of his plot of the land is worth $100,000, so he has to give the government $2,000. And the value of your plot, the value of your land is $2,000 as well. So both of you are paying $2,000. Now, before this happened, you were paying $3,000. So going down to $2,000, awesome. From your perspective, that's awesome. But from Fred's perspective, he has to pay double now. So he's like, what the fuck? So there's 2 options that Fred has. Fred has 2 options. One option is Fred says, this is bullshit. I'm going to sell. And he's presumably going to sell to someone who's going to build a house.
Sure.
I'm happy. Fuck you, Fred. We won't miss you. Okay? I'm happy. I'm a very happy man. That's good. Because when this new person comes in, when Sarah comes in with Ricardo, Sarah and Ricardo move in next door. And Sarah and Ricardo are going to build a nice $200,000 house on it, or, you know, and that also is going to make the value of your plot increase. It's going to make the total economy of the entire town better off because now we have Sarah and Ricardo instead of that fucking asshole Fred. I hate Fred. He's a piece of garbage. Okay, we don't like Fred. If you don't get anything else from this episode, understand Fred is bad. We don't like Fred. The point is that that's better for the economy. The other choice that Fred has is that he just says, nah, whatever, I'll pay the tax. Right? Which is like, it's not great, but at least we're getting the tax, and at least your taxes, the person who's providing money to the economy, are going down, which seems reasonable, right? You, as the person who's actually a real, like, invested member of society, should see your taxes go down. That seems good. Also, the third option is that Fred finally gets shit together and he's like, this is nonsense. I don't want to have to sit here and pay $2,000 on my empty plot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a house to show the government that, like, ha ha ha, like, sucks to suck. Now that we have a land value tax, like, my costs won't go up when I build a house. So there. And he builds a house. To which I respond, thank you, Fred, for making a house.
Yeah.
Thank you, Fred. That's very kind of you. And I'm all happy. Yeah. Because my problem with Fred wasn't just like a generic hatred of Fred. My problem with Fred was that he wasn't building a house. Yeah. That's the problem with Fred. If Fred would just build a freaking house, I would have no beef.
Yeah.
The problem with Fred is he's houseless. There's no house on this plot, and it's a problem because it makes the infrastructure bad. Okay. That's a land value tax.
Right.
It's good. We like the land value tax. Here is our second policy proposal.
Mm-hmm.
My second policy proposal is that we have this thing. We call it a national land trust, or a state land trust, or a city land trust.
Okay.
The way this works is that when we see a house mortgaged, default on its mortgage,
Mm-hmm.
we go, oh, that's bad, right?
Yeah.
We don't like that. As a general rule of thumb, it is not good when people default on their mortgages, because it generally means that they're homeless. Number one, not ideal. Number two, it means less money for society. Also bad. Neither of these things are good. So what we do is we say, okay, we will allow you, we will buy this mortgage from the bank, right? As the government, we'll buy it.
Yep.
And the bank is going to say, Gucci, we like it. And we will say, we also like it because now we own this house. And what we're going to say is, okay, person who's living there, you defaulted. That's not ideal. And they will say, yeah, I agree it's not ideal. I'm fucking homeless. Okay. And so what we'll say is, no, you're not homeless. We're going to let you live there, okay, for the next year and not pay anything. Just chill. Live there for the next year. Get your financials back into sort of a better position. And then you can either rent from us or you can go live somewhere else. And either one of those things is awesome for you. And either of those things is awesome for us. After that year of free rent for them, from that point forward, we rent it out. And we rent it out either through infrastructural rent, as I was describing, or through just normal rent, right? Just like giving money to it. And the only difference is that instead of it being a normal landlord, the landlord is the government. And that, in either case, is better. What do we do with this money? Here's my proposal. Okay. We're going to do it with the city of Pittsburgh, because I like Pittsburgh and I miss Pittsburgh, and I don't like being in Connecticut. Connecticut is a barren wasteland. But I'm here with my parents for the winter, and I'm not a little bit salty. Not salty at all. It is. You'll notice behind me that is a window. It is currently 4:27, and it is almost dark out. By 5, it will be dark out, and that makes me very upset. I'm not salty. The point is, we're talking about Pittsburgh. Okay. Total value of all the land of Pittsburgh, whatever it is, many billions, right? A lot of money. Okay. You start off with probably you only are able to buy up 0.1% of the value of all of the land in Pittsburgh, right? If the local Pittsburgh government were to do this, right? That's not very much. But what you do is you say, okay, 95% of that is going to go back into our slush fund to buy up more land. But 5% is going to go to improving the local area. So what we're going to do is we're going to say 5%, the 100 closest houses, right? All of you in the 100 closest houses. What we're going to do is we're going to provide you with the opportunity. We're going to send you a little mailer, and it's going to say, hey, this year, this house provided $100 worth of rent to you, right? Obviously, it was that's out of the 2,000 that I provided in total, because it's only 5% of the 95. Okay, so $100 worth of value. Now, we could provide you a bench. That's where the bench would go. Or we could provide you like very small. At first, these are going to be very small projects, right? Sure. But as you build that out, over the years, and as the number of them increases, between a lot of different, if you're building this out, right, and presumably this would be built out in like a very physical sense, right, the amount of housing that would be owned publicly would be increased, and therefore the amount of public value, even from just that small 5%, would increase, right? Okay. That increase, that just continues as it is until you get to 5% of the total land value of the entire city owned by the government. At that point, I should clarify, I'm saying land value, I mean property value. So this is both infrastructural value and also the value of the land itself. Okay, once you get to 5%, now you get to 5.1%. And now 5.1% is going to go to improvement.
Yeah.
And instead of 95%, 94.9% is going to go to buying up more land. You increase the amount that's going to the public in that sense all over time. And meanwhile, you're also increasing the total amount of value that you're able to buy up with and the total amount of land that you own, right, as you're doing that, all the way until you have 0.1% of your money is going to buying more land to buy that last 0.1% of the land, and the rest of it is going to improving Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
So that's how you do it.
Interesting. So you just need a lot of money.
You need a lot of money, but the thing is that the money is self-growing.
Yeah, but you need a lot of money to start.
You need a lot of money to start. Ideally, you need a lot of money to start. But like, the thing is,
really, I think you do need, because you can't like pay off a mortgage without a lot of money.
For sure. The thing is that, like, while you need a lot of money, you also need to think about like where you're spending that money, right? So you should be spending this money in, like, the reason I choose Pittsburgh is, yes, because I miss Pittsburgh, but also because Pittsburgh has like a lot of land that is sort of falling by the wayside right now, right? It is a city that has been in decline, similar in many ways to the history of Chicago. The one difference being that I think that it's been run a little bit better than Chicago, frankly. We have had a land value tax in our history. Our downtown still does have a 3% of the 3% more for land than it is for property, which is obviously not enough. It should be 100% more for land than for property. But like, in a lot of ways, Pittsburgh has been better run than Chicago. But in both cases, there are examples of cities that were really heavily reliant on industry that is now sort of falling by the wayside. So the value of this land is pretty low right now, and the opportunity for infrastructural improvement, for infrastructural rent, is very high. So I do think that if particularly we focus our early energy on buying up mortgaged property rather than just buying at normal market rate, that we can get a bunch of what amount to bargains, even though we're also really helping out the people who are living there.
Okay, that makes sense. I think the other issue is that you have to try and convince politicians to change, because I think it's a simple change, but I think it's a very drastic change as to how we've been doing things.
I agree with you. So there's two ways you can do that. Okay. There's the sort of incremental, let's get it passed in Congress. Let's get the city council on board kind of way, and that's one way, but it's not my way. My way is fuck city council. We will make them do it. And here's how. What we do is we say, Daddy Bezos. We like Daddy Bezos. We don't actually, but that's a different episode. The point is, Daddy Bezos, okay? Daddy Gates, okay? Daddy Elon Musk. I know you named your kid some crazy XA12, whatever the fuck. But like, listen, you got a lot of money. I need some money. Bezos, give me 100 million. Bezos says, yeah, all right, sure. What the hell? 100 million, 400 million, 600 million, whatever. It's all the same to me. Point is, he gives me $100 million. I say, thank you. Okay. We start a nonprofit. The nonprofit just does this shit.
Yeah.
Okay. And they just do start building out a bunch of really nice public spaces with all of that money from the 5%. They're starting to buy up more and more land in the city. They're starting to explain what they're doing to the public. All of the public are seeing that there's direct physical improvement based on this nonprofit from that 5%. Right. They're seeing that more and more land is going into the system. They're seeing that their cities are getting better. Right. And so then what you say is like, listen, I want to be part of the government. And the government says, Jonah, go fuck yourself. And I say, listen,
yeah,
I want to be part of the government. I am telling you, okay, that here we are sitting at this point on, it's been 20 years. We're sitting on like $150 million of property in your city.
Mm-hmm.
We have provided, whatever it is, $1.6 million dollars of improvement in your
Mm-hmm.
city to the infrastructure thereof, right? We have been providing mailers to explain. We've been really, heavily involved, because you can think about like as you're building out specifically in these very small pods of like the closest 100 families to this particular building, like you're starting to build out like neighborhood ties based on this, right? Like all of that is being built up over time. And then like, listen, buddy, like here I am. I'm going to be part of your government or else. And they have two options. They say, yes, Jonah, right? And then we're good. Or they say, Jonah, go fuck yourself. In which case I say, no, go fuck yourself. Because the reality is, at that point, most people don't feel all that connected to their local government, but they absolutely would feel much more in relation to the nonprofit that's actually providing them benches and letting them choose at a very physical level. Like, here's $300. Where do you want to spend it? Right? What do you want to spend it on? And just letting the closest 100 people vote, not 100 people, the closest 100 houses rather, vote on where they want to spend it. Sure. Like, that is democracy at its most sort of decentralized level. And it's something that is building this broader democratic support for whatever it is that you're arguing for. And so when you say, listen, buddy, if you don't do it, I'll just become fucking mayor and then I'll do it. Okay. And like, I don't really care. Like if it's some Georgist becomes mayor and gets this shit done, or like the current mayor says, oh shit, if I want to stay mayor, I just need to become a Georgist. Either way, we have a Georgist in office. I don't care the difference. That's the same to me. It's all the same so long as it becomes built in to the government and ultimately builds you towards a trajectory to get more funding from the government. And like, keep in mind that particularly if you do it starting at the nonprofit level, you can then say, okay, we're already getting from our own sponsors, from our own like nonprofit, non-governmental perspective, we're already pulling in whatever it is, $1 million new a year to build to buy up new housing, both from our own sort of coffers from the 95%, but also just from like private, people giving us money, right? Like, so in that sense, you're already getting a bunch of money. So like the government, if you want to be part of this process, you have to provide something too. So if we're going to do this, you have to give us $2 million a year. And the government says no. Then you say, go fuck themselves. Or they say yes, right? And so like the result of this is you end up getting a bunch of funding both from the public and the private sphere in order to ultimately build this into a public sphere, build the land into something that is owned by the collective rather than of the individual.
Interesting.
No. So that's the strategy. That is the land policy. All right.
Is there anything else you want to cover?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I guess there is. So a lot of people are worried when they hear this, that I mean all of the land. So I want to clarify. I don't mean all of the land. Okay. There is certain, like Central Park should stay Central Park.
Sure.
Right. There's a sort of breakdown of there's certain land that it makes sense. Yellowstone is an example also of land that like correctly should be used as public use land. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is a model to allow, because there's also value in having land that's like monopolistically utilized, right? Mm-hmm. Not monopolistically owned, but monopolistically utilized, privately utilized, right? There's no value in having just anyone who wants to walk into this house be able to do it.
Yeah.
No one's better off because of that. It's much better if like one family should have this house and that one family should like use it as they so choose, right? That makes a lot more sense. So the question is like, how do we use what is already private use land in a way that is productive publicly? That has no bearing on how we use public land publicly, because public land is already public, right? There's no dispute that like Central Park belongs to all of us.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course it does. There's no dispute. The question is like, how do we make it so that you know, the rest of Manhattan, even though it's not public use, becomes
Benefits the
publicly
public.
benefit.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a lot more like complicated stuff that we can get into down the line about like oil, right? Like what happens if there's like stuff that you find underneath the soil? How do you interact with groundwater? How do you interact with all that stuff? But I think we should go down the line for that one, because we're later going to be doing an episode that's going to discuss the importance of water as life.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
So stay tuned for that episode. Thanks
Stay
for
tuned.
getting into our show.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude, you're all so fantastic. We adore you. Thank you for being here. You're beautiful and I love you.